Hi, I'm Philip Hundl. I'm here with Carrie Lutringer. We're attorneys at Wadler, Perches, Hundl, and Kerlick. Carrie's practice area focuses on many things, but one of which is corporate formation or entity formation. We've had several other WPHK office hour videos, and we talked about business entities from corporations, limited partnerships, and LLCs. And we actually talked about kind of the initial considerations that people should think about for an LLC. Now I'm going to throw a wrinkle into this. Sometimes clients will come in and they have a scenario of, I have multiple rental properties, 20 to 30 rental houses. Do I need to form 20 or 30 separate LLCs? And you've got an answer for that.
Yeah, so the answer for that is no, you don't have to. Some people do choose to form multiple entities to hold different properties. But the great thing about a series LLC, as you mentioned, it's a fairly recent creation, but it's really just kind of spot on when it comes to owning property, being a real estate investor if you've got multiple properties that you want to protect. So the way I like to think about a series LLC is creating a single LLC. So that means, one certificate of formation that's filed with the Secretary of State, one filing fee, which, can be a fairly significant amount of money, especially if you're talking about forming multiple LLCs. The certificate of formation of a series LLC is a little bit different because there are some additional provisions that are included that essentially say this LLC is going to allow me to create different series. I like to think of a series as kind of a separate mini LLC underneath the main LLC. So the benefit of that is it allows you to take separate properties, put separate properties into the different series. I always like to visualize a series LLC also as just having different silos. So each property is in a different silo, and each silo is protected from the activities of the other silos. So let's say, for instance, you are a landlord and you've got 5 different rental properties. Instead of creating 5 different LLCs, having to manage 5 different sets of books, have 5 different sets of certificates formations, 5 different filing fees, you create a series LLC with 5 different series. Each series will hold a separate property, and if you have a liability associated with one property, so let's say, for instance, one of your tenants gets hurt and a court finds you negligent and issues a judgment, that judgment is only going to affect that one property. All of the other 4 properties in your LLC are protected. If you contrast that to a traditional LLC structure, you've got a single LLC with 4 properties in it. If there's one liability that attaches to that LLC due to one property, all of your properties, all 5 properties are at risk. So it's not the most ideal structure to set it up that way if you've got multiple properties. Series LLC is really a great solution to that because it allows you to kind of simplify the structure a bit, but also maintain separation between the liabilities and obligations of each separate property. Now, you do have to maintain separate books and records for each property. You don't necessarily have to have a separate bank account. I mean, that might be ideal, but it's not really feasible for a lot of folks. So what you really do need to be able to do is track all of your income and expenses and attribute it to each separate property within the series.
And what we see a lot of times, I think, with this is how to keep track is to, within maybe a software program like QuickBooks, there's these sub-accounts. I call them sub-accounts. Maybe they're called something else. But sub-accounts for each one of these mini LLCs, right? And kind of to go back to what you had talked about, if someone was successful in getting a judgment against one of the mini LLCs, that judgment would not affect any of the other mini LLCs within this series LLC, correct?
Right, that's right. Assuming that you're properly separating income and expenses and keeping the different series separate in terms of maintaining separate documentation and a few other requirements, then yes, that's the effect of it. Basically, all of your other properties, all of your other series are insulated from the liability that's associated with that silo or series.
But in contrast, as you kind of mentioned, if an LLC, someone's successful and gets a judgment against an LLC, all the property within that LLC would be potentially subject to that judgment, right?
That's right.
Now, nothing to say, if you create a series LLC and you say, under that mini LLC, I'm going to have 2 or 3 properties within that mini LLC, well, you've kind of defeated the purpose, And yes, if someone were to get a judgment against that mini LLC, all those properties within the mini LLC would be susceptible to that judgment,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah. So it's just a way to create a little bit more insulation or protection, hence the word silo or mini silos, kind of to protect. One thing that I know we always bring up with clients is, business or entity formation is a form of liability protection. It can be. Typically insurance is also a very good form of liability protection. We don't sell insurance, but that's something that everyone, I think, should always keep in mind, and make sure that the type of insurance that you get is the type of insurance that you need. And there's all kinds of the devil's in the details with insurance coverage. So make sure that you ask a lot of questions about insurance coverage. Regarding series LLCs, any other components of a series LLC that need to be taken into consideration in just the initial? Normally, there's a lot of deeds that need to be prepared. Having I guess we see series LLCs probably more with someone that has a lot of land, a lot of real estate, typically rental property or commercial property, right? So it's great to create one if you need one, but it's extremely important to make sure that property gets correctly transferred or conveyed into those mini LLCs. And so one thing that is helpful for us, I know, is getting having the legal descriptions,
Right.
if they have legal descriptions.
Sure.
So that's something that someone needs to begin to gather up and bring in when they're going to meet with you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Philip, as you point out, there is kind of an administrative component to this in terms of the documents that are going to need to be prepared. So it doesn't stop at just creating the series LLC. If you want to take advantage of liability protection, you actually have to deed the properties into the individual series, create an assumed name for each series, make sure that you've got series agreements, which are kind of like mini company agreements for each series, and then essentially make sure that you kind of close the loop to make sure that all of your properties are transferred into the LLC in order to take advantage of the liability protection that a series LLC will offer.
Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is my understanding of series LLCs, but the actual ownership in a series LLC can vary from mini LLC to mini LLC, right? Okay,
Sure.
so that actually throws another wrinkle or another component to give, if you're thinking about succession planning. I'm going to say founder, original owner has children or other business associates that they want to sell interest to, give interest to. There's ways to do that without that person owning a little bit of each property or an interest in all the mini LLCs, right? So
Yeah, that's right. And Philip, as you point out, each individual series can have different ownership. It also can have different management. So you can have a different set of managers for one property or one series than you have for the others. And it's just kind of, it gets to be kind of convoluted at times if you decide to change up the management and ownership among the series, the individual series. But it's definitely something that can provide a lot of flexibility and might make sense in certain scenarios.
And I know when this is explained to clients, sometimes they're overwhelmed because they say, well, this is so complicated, I want something very simple. And I guess oftentimes, unfortunately, there's a contract, it's you can't have something simple that gives you all these, advantages, right? So there's a little bit of complexity to it, but what we've seen is if you create the framework from the very beginning, and the correct framework and the right framework, then it's fairly easy to manage if you start out organized and with the right framework. So, Carrie, very helpful. A lot is, especially now, talked about with series LLCs. We hear a lot about series LLC. This is very helpful. Hope that was very helpful for everyone out there. So stay tuned for our next WPHK office hours. Thanks.